My name is Riley Hart. I'm 21. And my dad grounded me for disrespecting his brand new wife, a woman who barely knew my name but already acted like she owned the entire house, the fridge, the air, and my dad's spine. Before I tell you how all of this crashed into a $50 million disaster he never saw coming, hit subscribe so you don't miss the kind of family drama people think only happens in movies. Let me start from the beginning. My mom died when I was 8. It was sudden and unfair and the kind of grief that sticks to your bones. Dad and I weren't perfect, but we were a team. He packed my lunches, cheered at my games, took me fishing, and told me he'd never let anything break us apart. And I believed him, for years. Then he met Tessa, and just like that I became background noise. Tessa was everything my dad thought he wanted 32. Instagram perfect, fake sweet voice, and a smile that stretched too wide whenever money came up. She owned a luxury boutique that somehow never had customers but always had bags coming in. Dad introduced her like she was royalty. She introduced herself like she just won the lottery. Spoiler, she thought she had. Their wedding happened fast. Too fast, and with every month Dad changed, less laughter, more stress, less how was school, and more, why can't you just get along with her? Tessa sold him dreams of making her boutique global, and Dad's successful real estate developer. Deep pockets, big ego, thought he was saving her. I thought she was saving him. From his money. But the real blow-up started about 3 weeks ago. It was a Saturday morning. I walked into the kitchen half asleep and Tessa was already there, wearing silk pajamas and drinking matcha like she invented it. She looked me up and down. Riley, sweetie. It wouldn't hurt to brush your hair before coming downstairs, she said, plastering on her laminated smile. I blinked. I literally just woke up. She tapped her nails against the counter. Well, maybe try waking up earlier. Something inside me snapped before I even knew what I was saying. Maybe try minding your own business. Her eyes widened. She gasped like I slapped her. Your father will hear about this. I shrugged and grabbed cereal. She stormed out dramatically, heels clicking even though she was barefoot. Dad came charging in 10 minutes later, face red, voice booming. Riley, apologize to Tessa, right now. For what? I asked. Having messy hair at 9 a.m.? For disrespecting her, he barked. She's your stepmother, and she deserves respect. No, I said calmly. Mom deserved respect. Tessa deserves boundaries. That was it. Dad exploded. You're grounded for the rest of the month. No phone, no friends, no car. And you're not leaving this house until you apologize. I stared at him, stunned. Are you serious? Absolutely. Tessa stood behind him, peeking with that smug little smirk. I didn't apologize. So he really did it, took my phone, locked my car keys in his office, and went on with his life like punishing me made him some brave parent protecting a fragile flower in designer heels. 2 days into my grounding, the house got weird. Dad was suddenly on business calls at all hours. He paced around with a folder he never put down. He kept snapping at Tessa. She kept fake crying. Doors slammed. Voices rose. Things weren't cute anymore, and then I overheard the conversation that changed everything. Dad was in his office with his business partner, Mason, and they didn't know I was sitting on the hallway floor with my ear against the door like some spy movie reject. $50 million, Mark, Mason said sharply. That deal was our shot. You pulled out at the worst possible time. I didn't pull out. Dad hissed. The investors bailed. They said there were concerns. What concerns? Financial inconsistencies. And they're not wrong, someone's been moving money from my accounts. Large sums. My stomach tightened. Who? Mason demanded. Dad didn't answer immediately. Then, I think it's Tessa. My breath caught. Mason swore under his breath. Mark, I told you marrying her without a prenup was a mistake. I know, Dad snapped. But I didn't think she'd... He cut himself off. I backed away from the door, heart hammering. Money missing? Investors backing out? A $50 million deal collapsing? Because of her? That night, Tessa screamed at Dad for hours about trust issues. Dad yelled back about bank statements and transactions from her boutique. I couldn't hear everything. But I heard enough, and then... silence. The next morning, Dad came into my room. He looked exhausted, pale, like someone punched the life out of him. Riley, he whispered, we need to talk. I crossed my arms. About grounding me? No, he said slowly. About Tessa, he swallowed hard. About what I just discovered. And that's when everything shifted. Because Dad finally realized the person he was punishing was the only one who tried to warn him from the beginning. Dad didn't walk into my room like a man who grounded his daughter. He walked in like someone whose entire world cracked open overnight. His shoulders slumped, his eyes red, his voice flat like he hadn't slept in days. I sat up slowly, studying his face. I didn't know if I should be relieved or terrified. Riley, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I blinked. That sentence had never existed in his vocabulary. He sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking. You were right about Tessa, about everything. I didn't say anything. I wanted him to keep talking.
He swallowed hard. I found transactions, huge ones.
Money funneling out of my personal accounts, investment accounts, even the business accounts tied to the new project. Disguised as boutique expenses, his jaw clenched. But they weren't boutique expenses. My stomach dropped. How much? I whispered.
He hesitated. A lot. How much, Dad? He finally answered.
Almost 3 million so far. I covered my mouth with my hand. 3 million. Gone. And that wasn't even the worst part because that wasn't the only money in danger. And on top of that, he continued, voice cracking, the investors got spooked when they saw the irregularities. They backed out. The $50 million land development deal. He stopped, rubbing his forehead. It's dead. Completely dead. Silence swallowed the room. For years, Dad chased bigger and bigger projects. That deal was supposed to be his crown jewel, his retirement plan, his legacy, everything. Losing it wasn't a setback. It was a collapse. Dad. I whispered, not sure what else to say. He laughed bitterly. Funny thing is, I grounded you for being honest. Meanwhile, I married the one person who was lying to me every single day. A knock hit the doorframe. Sharp and sudden. Tessa. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, mascara smudged, either from crying or lack of sleep. Who knew? Her voice dripped with fake innocence. Sweetheart, are you coming downstairs? We need to finish our conversation. Dad stiffened. We're not done here. Yes, she said sweetly. We are. Dad turned to me. Stay here. Then he stood and followed her out. I didn't listen, obviously. I crept down the stairs and hid around the corner where the hall meets the living room. Their voices were clear. How dare you go through my accounts? Tessa hissed. How dare you steal from me? Dad snapped. I didn't steal anything. Those were business transfers. Business transfers don't go straight to private offshore accounts in your maiden name. My eyes widened. Offshore. That was intentional. Planned. Tessa's voice changed. Colder. Lower. Don't accuse me of something you can't prove. Oh, I can prove it, Dad said. And the police can too. Silence. Then Tessa laughed lightly, like he told a joke. You wouldn't put me through that. Not after everything. Not after I've been so good to Riley. I almost gagged. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You manipulated me. You drained me. You cost me investors, relationships, and a $50 million deal I spent 10 years building. A beat of silence. Then Tessa's voice sharpened like a knife. I told you that deal was risky. If you listened to me, maybe this wouldn't have happened, Dad scoffed. This happened because you robbed me blind. And then her mask cracked. You think you're the only one allowed to dream big? She snapped. You think your money doesn't come with responsibility. I deserve a piece. I married you. And you'll get nothing, Dad growled. Oh, I'll get something, she hissed. You gave me access. You gave me power. You can't take that back. My heart thumped wildly. Dad stepped back. Tessa, what did you do? Her voice softened into a whisper so venomous it made my skin crawl. You'll find out soon enough. She grabbed her purse, stormed past him, and walked out the front door. Dad stood frozen, completely still. Like if he moved, everything would fall apart. I stepped out from around the corner. Dad.
He turned to me slowly. I messed up, he whispered.
I messed up so badly. I walked toward him carefully. Did she really steal all that money? He nodded. And that's just what I found. Are you going to the police? He hesitated too long. Dad? I don't know yet. He dragged his hands down his face. If this goes public, the board will kill me. Investors will never trust me again. I'll lose everything. I swallowed. Dad, she stole from you. You can't just let her walk away. He really looked at me for the first time in years. You're right, and I need your help. I froze. My help? With what? He took a shaky breath. Tessa didn't steal that money alone. Someone helped her. Someone who had access to the business servers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I found this plugged into my office computer. You're the only person I know who understands tech. I need you to figure out what's on it. I stared at the drive. The grounding, the fights, the manipulation. Everything led to this moment. Dad's voice cracked. Riley, I need you. For years I begged him to see me. Now he finally did. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I would find. Dad placed the flash drive in my palm like it was radioactive. He didn't say anything else, but the look on his face said everything. Fear, desperation, shame. For years he treated my tech skills like a quirky hobby, something cute but useless. Now he was trusting it more than his own judgment. I closed my fingers around the flash drive. Okay, I'll look. Dad exhaled a shaky breath that was half relief, half collapse. Thank you, Riley, but I wasn't doing it for him, not entirely. I needed answers. And I needed to know exactly how deep Tessa had sunk her claws into our lives. I waited until he went upstairs to shower, something he hadn't done in a while, judging by the smell of stress coming off him, then slipped into his office. I locked the door behind me, sat at his desk, and powered on his computer. My heart drummed as I plugged in the flash drive. For a second, nothing happened. Then a single folder popped up. Boutique_backup_private. Yeah, right? I clicked it. Dozens of files appeared, each with names like INITI-Java, LND proof, D1 export, ledger coded, and others that looked like someone mashed random keys with their elbows. This wasn't boutique paperwork. This was deliberate obfuscation. I opened the first file, encrypted. Second, encrypted. Third, also encrypted. But whoever helped her wasn't as smart as they thought. They used a simple password protection shell. Amateur stuff. I cracked it in under 5 minutes. The first real document opened. And my stomach dropped. Spreadsheets, massive ones. Rows of numbers, dates, transfers, routing details, names of accounts. And one name appeared over and over, Hart Development Holdings. My dad's company. Then I saw something else. A second tab labeled Split Routes. I clicked it. There were columns labeled Primary Siphon, Secondary Diversion, Offshore Terminal, Final Receiver. The Final Receiver column made me feel physically sick. Not just Tessa's maiden name, but another name. Mason Drew. Dad's business partner. His best friend. The man who gave me birthday cards and pretended to care. I stared at the screen, stunned. My mind spun so fast it hurt. Mason wasn't just aware of the missing money. He was part of it. My breath came shallow. Dad trusted Mason more than anyone. Mason had been at our house constantly since Tessa arrived. He had access to the office. He had access to the servers. He had access to Dad's entire business structure. He didn't just help her.
He orchestrated it.
Footsteps creaked upstairs. Dad coming back. I yanked the flash drive out like it burned me, shoved it into my hoodie pocket, and sprinted away from the computer just as Dad appeared at the office doorway. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I lied. Still looking, he ran a hand through his damp hair. I'm sorry, Riley. I should have never put you in the middle of this. I swallowed. Dad, did you tell anyone else about the missing money? No, he said quickly. Just Mason. He tried to calm me down, said Tessa probably made a mistake. My blood went cold. Of course he said that. Dad, I whispered, you need to stop trusting him. He frowned. Why? I can't explain yet, I said. Not until I'm sure, but please, for now. Don't involve him. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. For the first time in years, he listened to me without arguing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had the flash drive hidden under my pillow like a secret I wasn't ready to touch. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mason's name, his signature, his betrayal. But the worst part? I had barely scratched the surface of the files. At 3 a.m., I finally got up, grabbed my laptop, locked myself in my room, and plugged the flash drive in again. File after file, I dug deeper, passwords cracked, documents decrypted. The more I read, the more everything made horrifying sense. Tessa didn't start the plan. Mason did. Tessa was the face, the distraction, the chaos. He needed her close to Dad so he could siphon funds without Dad noticing, so when everything went under, Dad would be too emotionally compromised to think straight. The $50 million deal collapsing wasn't bad luck. It was sabotage. Purposely engineered to push Dad into bankruptcy so Mason could swoop in and save the company. For cheap, for control, for everything. By sunrise, I had enough proof to bury them both. I walked downstairs, exhausted but electric with adrenaline. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee like it personally betrayed him. He looked up when he saw me. "You were up all night?" he asked, eyes worried. "Yeah," I said. "Dad." I found something. Before I could continue, a knock rattled the front door. 3 hard bangs. Dad stood slowly. "Who the hell?" He opened the door. Mason walked in. And he wasn't smiling. "Mark," Mason said tightly, "we need to talk, now." Dad stiffened. "This isn't a good time. It's about the company," Mason said. "Urgent." My heart pounded. He knew. He knew Dad was pulling away. He knew something cracked. His eyes slid to me, cold, calculating. "Riley," he said smoothly, "why don't you give your dad and me space?" I stepped forward, stomach burning. "No," I said. "Not this time." His jaw twitched. Dad looked between us, confused. And I realized everything was about to explode. Mason stepped fully into the house like he already owned it. He didn't wait for permission, didn't take off his coat, didn't blink. His presence filled the room with something thick and icy, something that made the hairs on my arms rise. Dad swallowed hard. "Mason, I told you this isn't the time." Mason's eyes didn't move from mine. "It's exactly the time." I could tell Dad felt it too, something was off. His posture stiffened, his hand subtly drifting toward me, like he suddenly remembered he should protect his daughter. But Mason took another step forward. "We need to discuss the land deal," Mason said tightly. "Before things get even worse." Dad rubbed his forehead. "Look, I told you there were concerns. Concerns you didn't tell me about," Mason cut in sharply. "Concerns that cost us $50 million. Us." Dad flinched. Mason saw it and pushed harder. "We were partners, Mark, partners, and you hid things. You let things collapse." Dad's eyes narrowed. "Don't put this on me." "Oh, I'm not," Mason said softly. "I'm putting it where it belongs." He turned to me and smiled. But it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile a wolf gives before it pounces. "Riley," he said slowly, "do you know how much your dad invested in you? In your schooling? In that fancy computer setup you love so much?" I stiffened. "What does that have to do with anything?" "A lot," Mason said. "When the company goes under, and trust me, you'll understand what financial consequences look like." Dad stepped between us. "Enough." But Mason didn't back up. His voice dropped lower, colder. "I warned you, Mark. I told you Tessa was unstable. I told you she was trouble. But you didn't listen." Dad stared at him like he'd been slapped. "You told me she made a mistake. You defended her." Mason's eyes flickered, just for a second. "I was protecting the partnership." "No," I said quietly. "You were protecting yourself." Both men looked at me. I pulled the flash drive out of my pocket, holding it between my fingers like a loaded weapon. Dad's eyes widened. "Riley." Mason's jaw tightened. "Where did you get that?" "Oh, this," I asked innocently. I pulled it out of Dad's office computer. "The same one you borrowed last week." Dad's head snapped toward Mason. "You used my office computer?" Mason forced a thin smile. "I was helping." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You were stealing." A silence so sharp it hurt filled the room. Dad's breathing quickened. "Riley, what's on that drive?" I kept my eyes on Mason. "Everything." He stepped forward abruptly. "Give it to me." Dad moved in front of me so fast the floorboards creaked. "Back up." For the first time, fear flickered across Mason's face. not panic fear of being exposed. Riley, Dad whispered. What's on it? I swallowed hard. Transactions, transfers, offshore accounts, all routed through your company. All linked to Tessa. I paused. And to Mason. Dad's face drained of color. Mason. Tell me she's lying. Mason inhaled deeply, shoulders rising like he was drawing in patience or rage. Mark, she doesn't understand what she saw. Numbers can be misinterpreted. I scoffed. Not encrypted spreadsheets showing millions disappearing into your personal accounts. Dad's hands curled into fists. You did this? Mason's voice turned deadly calm. I did what had to be done. What the hell does that mean? Dad yelled. It means, Mason snapped, losing his composure. You were distracted, weak, open to manipulation. Someone had to protect the business. By stealing from it, I shot back. Mason's jaw clenched. By keeping it afloat, Dad stepped forward, face red with anger. You cost me everything. No, Mason said coldly. Tessa did. I just accelerated the fall. I froze. Accelerated. He said it like he wanted the collapse, like it was planned. Dad seemed to realize the same thing. You sabotaged the deal. You tanked it. Mason didn't deny it. I warned you she'd ruin you, he said. But you were too blinded by your midlife crisis Barbie doll to listen. So yes, I pushed things along. I made sure the investors saw the instability. It was the only way to take the company back from your disaster of a personal life. Dad's voice cracked. You were going to steal the company. I was going to save it, Mason corrected, voice tightening. And if that meant removing you from leadership temporarily. Removing? Dad barked. You were going to frame me. Mason didn't look away. That was the answer.
Dad lunged.
I'd never seen my father attack someone before. He grabbed Mason by the collar and slammed him into the wall. A picture frame fell and shattered. Mason shoved him back hard. They stumbled, crashed into the dining table, dishes clattering. Dad! I yelled, but neither of them heard. Mason shoved him again. You ruined this company. Dad shoved back. You betrayed me. Their fight hit a fever pitch, bodies slamming against furniture, curses flying. Mason threw the first punch. Dad blocked the second. They crashed into the floor, rolling, fists flying, years of friendship turning into hatred with every blow. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed my phone and hit record proof, evidence, everything. Dad finally shoved Mason off him, chest heaving. Get out, he snarled. Before I call the police. Mason stood, straightening his jacket, breathing hard. This isn't over, he said quietly. You don't know who you're dealing with. He turned toward the door. But then he looked back at me. And the look he gave me chilled my blood. You, he said softly, pointing at me. You should have stayed out of this. Then he walked out. The door slammed behind him. Dad collapsed into a chair. I ended the recording. And I realized Tessa wasn't the biggest threat. Mason was. And now he knew I had the evidence to destroy him. After Mason slammed the door behind him, the entire house felt like it was holding its breath. Dad sat hunched at the dining table, knuckles scraped, chest rising and falling in uneven waves. I stood frozen, phone still warm in my hand from recording everything. For years, Mason had been like an uncle to me. Seeing the truth, all of it felt like watching a mask melt off a monster. Dad finally looked up, voice low. Riley, what have I done? I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. You trusted the wrong people. That's not your fault. But now we have proof. We can stop them. He rubbed his temples, exhausted. If this blows up publicly, investors will pull out of every future project. I'll lose the company, the properties, everything. And if we don't act? I asked. Mason will finish what he started. I paused. Dad, he threatened me. Dad's eyes sharpened instantly. What? He pointed at me and said I should have stayed out of it. My voice wobbled, despite trying to sound strong.
He knows I have the proof. That snapped something inside him. Dad stood, fists tightening.
Then we take him down first. I nodded, pulling the flash drive from my pocket. We need a digital trail, a full one. Not just the stolen transactions, everything. The offshore accounts, the fake invoices, the server breaches. And we need to show who accessed the company system. Dad exhaled slowly, marking the whole path. Showing intent, Exactly. I looked up at him. Do you trust me?
He sat back down closer, steadier.
More than anyone. We spent the next 4 hours building a case. I decrypted the remaining files, stitching together each piece like a puzzle only chaos could create. Dad printed documents and cross-referenced dates with meetings and investor calls. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Mason and Tessa had been working together for nearly a year. She funneled money. He manipulated investors. Together they planned to tank the company, buy it for pennies, and restart under a different name. And Dad, he was the perfect fall guy, emotional, distracted, recently married to a woman people already whispered about. The kind of man investors would believe had mismanaged things. When I uncovered an email draft Mason wrote to the board blaming Dad for financial instability and emotional volatility, Dad froze mid-breath. He was going to present this next week, Dad whispered. He was going to remove me officially. And then his voice cracked not in anger but in heartbreak. Riley. He was my best friend. I rested a hand on his arm. Not anymore. By late afternoon, we had everything organized: files, recordings, logs, timestamps. But we needed one last thing, someone who would take it seriously. Someone who wasn't already tied to Mason. Dad made the call. Detective Alvarez, he said when the phone picked up. This is Mark Hart. I need to report financial fraud. And I have evidence. Within an hour, 2 detectives were at our dining table, reviewing everything. They didn't blink, didn't question, didn't dismiss. When they finished, Alvarez leaned back. This is enough to file immediate charges. We'll put out a warrant tonight. But be aware people like Mason don't go down quietly. Dad nodded. We're ready. We'll need statements from both of you, Alvarez added. I sat straighter. I'll testify. The detective looked at me with something like respect. Good. It might make all the difference. That evening, the sun was going down when a familiar engine growled outside. Not Tessa's, Mason's. Dad and I rushed to the window. Mason sat in his SUV at the curb, staring directly at our house, watching, observing, waiting. Dad inhaled sharply. Stay inside. But Mason didn't get out. After a moment, he rolled down his window. Even from far away, I could see his smirk. A police car turned the corner. Mason's smirk dropped. Another squat car appeared behind him, then a third. Dad whispered, "They're already here." Detective stepped out, approaching the SUV with purpose. Mason opened the door, hands raised in mock innocence until they pulled out the cuffs. "What is this?" he barked. "You have no idea what you're doing." Alvarez spoke loudly enough for us to hear through the window. Mason drew, "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial sabotage." Dad exhaled shakily. I squeezed his hand. Mason's eyes snapped to our window. Pure hate, pure shock, pure defeat. "You'll regret this," he shouted as the officers dragged him toward the patrol car. Dad stepped onto the porch, voice firm. "No, Mason, the only one regretting anything is you." The door slammed shut behind the officers. Mason was gone. For the first time in months, maybe years, Dad turned to me with pride not filtered through work or stress or grief. Pure, genuine pride. "Riley," he said softly, "you saved me." I smiled weakly. "Maybe now you won't ground me for telling the truth." He actually laughed, tired but real. "I'll never make that mistake again." We stood on the porch, the night finally quiet, the danger finally over. Dad lost a $50 million deal. But he gained back something he didn't realize he'd been missing, his daughter. And this time, he wasn't letting her go.